All right. Hey, Travis.
Hello.
So, just for the audience and the sake of them understanding the context here, I'm Angie Gallagher, and I'm a documentary photographer who's very interested in entrepreneurship and Colorado citizens and what we've been going through with this pandemic, and doing this project with one of the curators of History Colorado. And really honored to have CEO and entrepreneur Travis Luther, who is a serial entrepreneur living here in Denver. And so Travis, why don't you go ahead and start off introducing yourself of, when you first came to Colorado and then the start of these businesses you launched here.
Okay, thanks, Angie. Yeah, my name's Travis Luther. I'm the CEO of Lawfather, which is a legal technology company, and also of Queen Anne Pillow, which is a luxury pillow manufacturer. I came to Colorado in 2004 after 10 previous years as a struggling entrepreneur who was never very successful. I actually came to Denver because my best friend at the time had come here to get his PhD and had bought a condo and knew I was kind of struggling. And he said, "Why don't you just come out to Denver, stay with me, and just kind of figure out what you want to do." So I didn't want to just do that without a plan. So in 2004, I decided to return to college to finish a bachelor's degree I had started, when I was 18 years old, like everybody else, and and came out to MSU Denver and got into the marketing program. And got really interested in the emergence of online marketing and pay-per-click advertising and search engine optimization. And I was working on that for myself when I met my future wife, an attorney named Summer Luther. And, she was a member of the Colorado Trial Lawyers Association, and she was seeing lawyers at the time posting for help, wanting help with marketing or wanting help with graphic design to do brochures. And she knew that I was involved in these things, so she started referring me to people who were posting on that listserv, asking me if this was work I wanted to do or work I could complete. And so, that started in 2005. By 2006, I could sense that there was maybe this market here that I hadn't considered, which was serving the technology needs of lawyers. And so I told the one guy who was working for me at the time, my company was called Luther Media. I said, "Well, let's change the company name to Lawfather and just pretend that all we do is work for attorneys." And so we launched a little site called lawfather.com. And, within 9 months, that was really my full-time
Yeah.
gig. And, here we are, I guess, almost 15 years later.
Wow. Wow. Very cool. And then I know that you own a couple different businesses, and of course within Lawfather, there's a couple different products and services like any company expands, but talk about Queen Anne as well, because
Yeah,
that's another, really cool business that you own.
yeah. So at some point after starting Lawfather, I don't think the two are related, but I started developing had back problems. And I had seen all these ads for, get this pillow, it'll solve your neck pain. And I wondered, hey, is there a pillow out there that can solve my back pain? Did some internet research and couldn't really find anything. So I decided to just try and make my own pillows. I found a company that manufactured pillows, and they let me screw around with the ingredients, and I would send stuff back and forth to them and say, hey, can you try this fill on this size? And I finally got a set of pillows that I really liked and that I was comfortable with. And, my friends were like, that's really neat. Maybe you should think about a pillow company. And so, taking my online marketing expertise, I started doing research on how people actually searched for pillows online as well, and discovered there was really this big hole for a pillow company that could not only sell pillows but could educate people on the differences between pillows, because that's what I was struggling to understand. I could find a $4 pillow at Target, and I could find a $400 pillow online at Neiman Marcus, and I was like, what's the difference between these? So I decided to give it a shot, and I started as Queen Anne Pillow as a side project, I think in you know 2013 or something like that,
Okay.
maybe 2014. And did wasn't terribly successful until maybe about 2017, when I had a second back surgery and I was laid
Oh,
up in
yeah.
bed, and I thought, I'm going to get serious about this Amazon thing that my buddy keeps telling me I should get serious about, and I'm going to list all of our pillows on Amazon. And, within a month of doing that, I realized that this was really a gold mine. And our company really took off, and over the last few years has been wildly successful, and I'm grateful for that.
Yeah, that's really awesome. And, in terms of like the operations of the company, clearly you serve, at large, a lot of attorneys in Colorado, but I mean, I would consider you a nationally based business because your clients reach beyond Colorado, right?
Yeah, we serve clients all over the country. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right, right. And then your team, are some of them here, or have you been working remotely even prior to something like, COVID?
We have evolved for sure. So, as a result of COVID, I unfortunately had to lay almost all of my team off because of the courts the courts that we work in have been closed. But it has really evolved. At my height, I had, I think, about 15 staff members that were all in our office downtown in Denver.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
Um, we moved to Greenwood Village, mostly motivated by the high cost of parking downtown, and
yes.
finding an office
Huh?
in Greenwood Village that had free parking for that many people.
Yep.
And at that point, some of the people didn't want to move down there, so we started doing some telecommuting, and then as those people fell off, we started just doing some contractors, and then some of the people wanted to just become contractors. And so I would say for the bulk of the business, we've had a really healthy blend of remote workers, 1099 contractors, and on-site employees. At this point, we have no office. We all work virtually, myself included, and we'll see what the future is as far as
Yeah.
what that might. As I'm sure a lot of business owners are figuring out, do we need a central office location anymore?
Ah, absolutely. And it's funny that all that began with like the stress and high cost of parking.
Yeah,
I mean, it's a big deal. Like, do I want to be white knuckling it through downtown? That commute makes a big difference in our day.
yeah.
And then on top of it, the expense, So talk to me, and talk to our audience here about the 2008 recession. Here you are with Lawfather, you've got your niche, so to speak, and you're jamming, and then 2008 hits. What happens then?
Our business takes off. I
Yeah.
mean, yeah, it was a young business to start. So those, every year always looks, 500% growth, 1,000% growth, but our business really took off. And, I can't, at the time, I don't, at the time I remember thinking, okay, this is, we're in a recession, and what does that mean for me? Because Lawfather was really the first business that I had where I had left other employment altogether. Like I
Wow.
always would have some kind of job while I had my
Yeah.
other businesses. I might be parking cars or delivering pizzas or working part-time as an office manager or something like that. But I'd come here to go to school, and I had finished school, and I decided to go to graduate school as well. So, as the recession hit, I was also entering graduate school and managing this growing business. So I remember thinking, gosh, how is this going to affect me? And in some way also thinking, God, thank God I stayed in school and went to graduate school, because if this whole thing falls apart because of the recession, at least I have in my education to fall back on.
Yeah.
But we actually did well. Our client base grew, and especially our marketing and mediation services. And this is what I was told, and I can't tell you if this is true or not, but because we work with the plaintiff's side, so we work with not the Frank Azars of the world per se, but we work with people who do that work, which means they represent individuals, and they generally represent those individuals against insurance companies. And so when I would talk to attorneys about, gosh, why do you have so much money when right now while other people are struggling? I was told multiple times it's because when the economy goes bad, insurance companies want to settle out the cases that they have on their books,
Oh, okay.
because when the market is good, they want to keep their money in the market as long as they can, because that money is growing faster than the cost associated with paying out claims.
Okay.
I thought, gosh, isn't that interesting? So maybe I've stumbled into a recession-proof business that
Uh,
make it better during recessions and then level that
right.
off during normal times. So, I mean, we had exponential growth during that time.
Wow.
We went
Wow.
from, a couple people in my basement to, getting that office downtown and starting to hire, more and more full-time people.
Yeah, yeah. So you take that experience where you're seeing a recession hit, right? Economy's going down, and you're seeing that your niche in particular grows. So then what did you take from that experience, and how does that, fit any similarities or differences between 2019, 2020 COVID?
It I mean, the one lesson that I took is that everybody has their own market that they need to be aware of, and it's not always necessarily the market that we're hearing about on TV, or that's affecting everybody. Everyone
Okay.
is affected differently,
Yeah.
and it's important to understand the dynamics of your own market. So I was not old enough to prepare for recessions back then. It was
Yeah.
nothing that I had even thought about, but now I do think. But since then, even though I don't know if you want to say I was lucky, but I was fortunate that
Yeah.
we did well. It was a good reminder that I needed to be prepared for when my market would be more affected by those things. And so that put more emphasis on me, on looking at my financial health, and not just like the growth of my company. So rather than just looking at revenue, I also
Yeah.
was like, I also need to understand our financial health. So if that revenue falls off, like what resources do we have in bucket A and bucket B and bucket C,
I
and
see. I
yeah,
see. That
uh,
allocation, prepared
yeah,
allocation.
yeah, exactly. So that if we did suffer a 25% loss in revenue or something like that, what would be our plan?
Yeah.
So I got to look at thinking about that plan in calmer times, which I always think is to anybody's benefit, right? Not, not to come up with a plan when you're panicked, but
Yeah,
to
right.
come up with a plan when you've got a little space and peace.
Yeah.
Uh, I would say that has no relationship to what we went through with regard to COVID. You know,
Mhm.
and admittedly, I don't know that there's a lot of people who could say that they could plan for something of that nature. I think
Right.
it's one thing you know, to plan for, well, we don't want to have one client that represents 25% of our revenue, or maybe we don't want to have one funnel that represents, 80% of our leads. Cause if that, goes away, then what do we do? But to have just, I mean, really a night and day, shift from
Yeah.
income and revenue, uh, I was not prepared for that. And I think that, um, I also was really optimistic about how fast we were going to recover from that, or how fast things were going to change. And it put me as a business owner in the toughest spot I'd ever been. I mean, I'd been through downturns in our business before,
Yeah.
where I had to make tough choices about, who was going to continue to work for us, or,
Yeah.
what the labor arrangement was going to be. But I never had taken so much of my personal wealth, if you will,
Yeah.
reinvested it back in the business under the hope that this was going to resolve in 2 months, then 3 months, then
Yes.
5 months, then and
Right.
here we are a year and a half. And as I was telling you before our call, this week is the first time that I
Yeah.
have invoiced for our work,
Yeah.
and if I had known that, I would have made different decisions. So I think there's probably a lot of small business owners who were very optimistic, as we have to be entrepreneurs, who
Yeah.
probably have lost a lot of their personal wealth trying to salvage their businesses. And in my situation, it wasn't worth the investment, if you will, in
Oh,
keeping to it wasn't worth the investment, because it was just a drain. I hope that makes
yeah.
sense. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
we didn't get back open. We never got back open. So all the money and
Yeah.
resources that I kept to keep people employed, and to come up with projects for people to work on, even with the little bit of PPP money that we got, it set me back, and I think that that's kind of unfortunate.
Right, right. Yeah, this is when we're thinking it's an investment to keep it going.
Yeah.
And then it quickly just rapidly turns into defined as loss,
Yes, absolutely.
and then it's like, this is no longer investment and I can't keep pulling my money into it. But on the flip side, so, what I'm hearing, Travis, is that with COVID, it was so unusual to any other downturn or recession that no matter how prepared anybody could be,
Mhm.
you really couldn't be prepared. And part of it was this uncertainty in the beginning. I remember it was like day by day.
Right,
Then it turned into, well, what's going on this week?
right.
Then it was month by month.
Yeah,
Then it was kind of quarterly,
yeah,
I mean, I think it starting like February, March. And I think most of us thought we'd be out of this by June.
yeah, yeah,
That did not
yeah.
happen.
It did not happen. And I mean, just if the listeners aren't clear about this, the majority of our business is that we rent audio video equipment to attorneys and to courthouses.
Yeah.
We go install that equipment for trials, for jury trials, and then our technicians sit there and run that equipment. So unlike, restaurants and other places which suffered really bad. In fact, my brother and his wife lost their restaurant over
Oh,
COVID.
yeah.
But unlike those businesses which were allowed to operate at 50% capacity or something like that, the courthouses just closed 100%. And
Right.
there were no in-person trials, and there was no courtroom anything. So it wasn't even that we had the 50% or 25% to fall back on. We had
Mm-hmm.
we had nothing. We had
Mm-hmm.
absolutely nothing. And,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think that's also unusual. It's not unheard of. I'm not the only person who's gone through this, but
Yeah.
I think that that's a more unusual situation for small business owners to have been in.
Right. And then talk about, on the flip side, what was happening with Queen Anne.
Yeah, so Queen Anne, on the other hand, was starting to. It had a bad month in March and April, which really gave me pause because I thought, well, if Lawfather is going to go out of business and now Queen Anne's going to go out of business, I'm going to have to get an application to Starbucks or something. I'm going to be in some real trouble. But after April, it just really started to take off. I think as people realized, okay, I'm going to be in my home for a while, or I'm going to be working from my home for a while. I think people started to prioritize their homes and looking around.
Hmm.
How can I get more comfortable in my space? And pillows, thank goodness, was one of those ways. Um, and
Nice.
so, yeah, I had, for as little trial work as I had plenty to do on the pillow side of the business. So,
That's really awesome. That's really cool. And so Queen Anne is like, how do you like me now?
yeah,
Right.
exactly.
So you started putting more energy into that. And then, continuing on with Lawfather, and now you're starting to see that pick back up.
Yeah, Lawfather had some services, some smaller services that we could do, but nowhere near what was needed to support myself or the payroll. Uh,
Hmm.
but it's just now, and we're here in May 2021. It's just now that the courtrooms are actually starting to open back up for in-person stuff. So we're not terribly booked in May, but there's a couple things coming in June, and then July, and then August. So I'm starting to see the calendar fill up in ways that I'm more familiar with than I was pre-COVID. So I am in an interesting position now where one of my businesses has really taken off as a result of COVID. The other one has really died as a result of COVID. And now that business that's died is starting to come back. And I'm kind of trying to assess, what do I do now that I've already unfortunately had to let all these people go, and that my own attention has been turned to my pillow company. What do I want to do? What do I want to do as far as rebuilding? Where is my expertise
Priorities.
value gonna get me more return? There's another interesting phenomenon that's happened too, and you may have seen this, but leading up to COVID, I was like, these people don't realize like that these courthouses and these have like no technology. Like some of them didn't even have public Wi-Fi. You know what I mean? And so
Oh,
and I would always be saying like, why are these courtrooms more up to date? I mean, like, in one hand, thank God they're not, because it keeps me working. But on the other hand, it's just kind of unbelievable that
Why
they
is
don't
it
have,
so archaic?
yeah, yeah, and they're so archaic, you'd expect there'd be a gallows in the back and that they just like take care of everything like the old West, because there's no
Right.
internet, there's no phones, there's no
Yeah,
TV.
yeah.
But COVID has forced the courts to
Yes.
update, and so the courts, having done virtual hearings, are now more apt to do virtual hearings. They're now more apt to do um, they do trials with judges, but the attorneys and the judges are doing those remotely too. So I'm kind of sensing that I'm going to get double stung here, because COVID has forced the courts to update their technology,
Yeah, I
which
see
is
where you're
going to
going with this.
less
Uh-huh.
need for me as well. So I'm debating that too as I think about my plans moving forward.
Yeah, you may have to launch a consulting arm.
Yeah, who knows? But I did.
Because they don't know what to buy.
Yes, right, right, right. But necessity necessity has got them figuring that out. So,
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
but we
I
did launch a software product a couple years ago to allow attorneys to give digital presentations on their own without necessarily having to hire us. And we did see that grow over COVID as well. And so that has been another positive outcome. So if the trend were to stay towards more digital presentations and remote presentations, then we have a good opportunity to grow that software part of our business.
I see. And I remember when you were starting that, what is the name of the app or the software?
It's called TrialLine,
Okay.
trialline.net, and it's an interactive digital timeline tool that allows attorneys to create fact-based timelines that then they can sort by different categories and facts and things, and give presentations about their cases that are easily to understand because they're in event by event detail.
I see. And if I understand it correctly, basically they're killing they're getting multiple things done in one swoop, like while they're researching and taking their notes and collecting the data that gets collected. But meanwhile, they can kind of very quickly kind of put that in presentable form.
Yeah.
The pieces that they need to put into presentable form that are a lot more understandable for their audience as well. So it's not so abstract.
Right. Absolutely. And it
Very
definitely
nice.
helps with, a jury, helping a jury understand information quickly.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
helps the attorneys themselves build better strategies about their cases because they can actually physically see what's going on versus the old way of passing binders of paper to each
Oh
other.
my gosh. Yeah.
So,
Right, right. And by the time it gets down to the last person, they're on to the next topic, so to speak.
yeah,
But if you can present it, then everybody's on the same page together.
exactly.
So, in wrap up of like this whole recession piece and COVID and whatnot, what would you say has been like the one thing that you felt like in terms of owning a business and being CEO of a company and having to make those hard decisions, what's the few or single thing that during that whole time you definitely had to keep working on? Was it the marketing piece? Were you networking more? Were you reaching out to your network and people? Did it get you back to that? What are some of the things that really were stringent in keeping it going?
I have to say, honestly, it was this like I had to really battle this feeling sorry for myself almost,
Ah, yeah.
right? Like I had like there was a time there where I was there was just this sense that everything was so unfair, like I
Yeah.
didn't choose this. I don't have any control over this. And
Yeah.
as an entrepreneur, we go into business because we want to have control and we want to dictate the terms of our lives.
That's
And
right.
suddenly this thing completely out of my control just took all the control from me. And it was a situation I hadn't been in 20 years, And so I had to make a decision. Was I going to wallow in the pity of the bad situation, or was I going to look for opportunities in the bad situation,
Yeah.
embrace them, and thrive? And I think that the pillow company was okay. There is an opportunity here for me. I am not totally helpless, but I've got to be purposeful about going for it. And then with our software, understanding that as digital presentations become more and more expected, I've got to embrace that too. And so part of me had to let go of the pain and sorrow of
Yeah,
losing what I had built for so long,
right.
and then say, okay, that's that, and this is now. And you've got to take all that energy and all of that strategy that you've been successful with, and you've got to start applying it in places where you can have control and be successful.
Yeah, yeah. And
Yeah,
time becomes a very critical matter. Every click matters,
that's right.
every hour matters. And
That's
like you
right.
said, being very intentional and purposeful, because if anything, COVID put this, it was almost like the twilight zone in terms of a sense of time,
Yeah, yeah, for
So
sure.
one last thing I'd love to touch on, and this is something I always admire about you as an entrepreneur and someone who's so involved in community. Community is really important to you. You're part of the entrepreneurs organization, but also you and I first met because I worked at CU Denver. And, we were launching this business plan competition and you were our sole giver, our number one. And you really didn't hesitate. And I didn't have to keep talking you into it because you already came to this, college setting, and like you knew how important it was, not only to you, but to the future of, the students and the Colorado youth, of your support. So I'd love to hear more about that because you've always been so supportive of college students and probably other areas I may not be aware of.
Well, I think college students takes the majority of it.
Yeah.
My wife and I, now that we're, I mean, COVID aside, I mean, we have established ourselves as professionals and entrepreneurs in the community, and we've been successful in our businesses and our pursuits, and we started to get a little more involved in philanthropy and just thinking about legacy for our family in general. And part of that for me is I didn't have a lot of mentors growing up. I was a very poor kid, single mom, 3 kids, welfare, food stamps, all of that stuff. And I didn't have a lot of educated, driven people around me. Unfortunately, poverty is kind of a recursive cycle that breeds more poverty, and it is tough to break out of it.
Yeah.
And I think that I realized, like, it would have been really easy for me to be much more successful faster if I just had a mentor who was willing to talk to me and walk me through some stuff.
Right.
Having gone back to school later in life and then getting involved in the schools, I thought, gosh, I want to be that one person. I just want to find that young me and be there for them and give advice and give direction. And so, yeah, that started with going back and teaching as a professor of entrepreneurship. That started as being the entrepreneur in residence in your program. And
Yeah.
then we just launched an endowment at MSU Denver to help students who are 1 year away from graduation come
Yeah.
back and complete their degrees with some money that we've put in that foundation. And then I've also served as a national chair for the Global Student Entrepreneurship Awards.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
that's great.
I don't know if you saw, but there was just a documentary made about that program and
Ah,
what I did at MSU, and CU Denver was a partner of mine on that too. So there's a Nat Geo documentary called Own the Room, and
ah.
you can see our school and you can see our program in there, and I won't ruin the end of it, but we were very successful, I will say that, in what ended up being a global competition that concluded just before COVID.
Wow.
But yeah,
Yeah.
it's on the Disney Channel.
Oh my
It's on
gosh.
Disney Plus. Sorry, Disney Plus. It's
Oh,
called
that's even
Own
better.
the Room. So, I love the enthusiasm of entrepreneurs who are in
Yeah.
college, who have not been beat up yet and have not got all cynical and negative, and
Yeah.
I love being able to support them.
Right, right. That's awesome, Travis. Your work, that I would say you probably touch more people than you realize.
That would
Sure.
be that would be
I'm
an
sure there's, I've worked around college students for years and they're not, it's not to any fault of their own. It's where they're at, in their lives. They're not really the first to like tell someone how much it meant. And then sometimes it's years later that they realize, wow, that guy, Travis Luther, really, like, his words really went decades with me.
yeah.
So you probably impact far more people than you realize. And then now that it's on Disney Plus, even more.
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. Well, that would be awesome. That would definitely
Yeah.
be awesome.
And likewise, even with this Zoom, you know, there's a lot of people that will get a lot of use of information in terms of, you know, what it's like to be a business owner during extremely difficult times, you know, which is basically an understatement.
Yeah.
But then also what life is like during, you know, 2020s, 20,000s in Colorado. And I'm sure decades from now, there'll be similarities, right? Entrepreneurship always has that same foundation, whether you have a trading post in the 1800s, it's still about sales, right?
No doubt. No
Or
doubt.
even in the future, if we can transport. So
Yeah. No kidding.
thank you for your time, your expertise, and just sharing this journey. And it's very enriching to have you part of the Colorado community, giving back in so many ways, including with this recording.
Thanks, Angie. I was honored to be invited, so I really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll wave off to our audience.